start, and obviously we can let people in as and when. So I'll do the first thing first, which is something I always forget to do, and that's introduce myself at this point. So my name is Matt Callaghan. I'm one of the economic development officers at Swansea Council, and myself and Steve looking after the business Swansea programme, of which this session forms part of this morning. So Power Hour is one of the events that we run on a monthly basis, along with our other business Swansea events, which includes the Startup Enterprise Club, the communication channels, which you might have seen. Conducting these sessions online at the moment, obviously, but we do have an ambition, and hopefully as spring comes around, that we'll be in a position to start maybe doing one or two of these sessions in person, and we'll get to see you in sort of in face to face, which would be really nice because it's been a long time. Just a few housekeeping points to cover off before we make a start. First is to make you aware this session is recorded and will appear on our YouTube channel hopefully later this afternoon, but certainly in the next 48 hours or so. And there's two reasons for mentioning that. First of all is to let you know that if you miss anything in this session, you can go back and watch it on our YouTube channel at a later date. So don't worry about taking down all the notes that you need to, because it will be available later on. And secondly, obviously, as it's going online, so if you don't want your face to appear on the recording for any reason, then just turn your camera off by clicking the little camcorder camera icon in the top bar of the Teams application. If you can mute your microphones whilst the speakers are speaking, that would be helpful, just to avoid any background noise. We've got two presentations, both of which are relatively short. Emily will be covering the first one from Development Bank, and then I'll just sort of cover some more general points about areas, locations that you can find and identify potential funding sources. I think what we'll do is we'll run through both presentations and then come back and take questions at the end of both of those. So rather than interrupting the speakers, if you could either put your questions in the chat using the little speech bubble icon at the top of the screen, or hold your questions until the end, and then we'll come back and take them rather than breaking up the presentations throughout. So what I'm going to do first of all, before we get into our first presentation, is just to run around the room, get you to introduce yourselves, a little bit about who you are, what your business is, and what brings you to this session today. So David, if I could start off with you.
Hi, good morning. Dave Picton, a company called Green Earth. We specialise with a liquid additive that goes into the heating systems, water the heating systems, very, very quickly. Science is that it breaks surface tension, so therefore there is a saving to be made both in energy cost and carbon reduction. So it's very current. We're very busy, I'm pleased to say. I'm based myself in Swansea, so it's something I want to get traction of in South Wales and move things forward. We do cover the whole of the country, the UK, and we're dealing currently with the likes of NHS, universities, and the hospitality industry. So I'm very interested to listen to what you or your speakers have to say, and to see if there's anything I can link into.
Okay, and without giving any sort of commercial confidentiality away, is funding something you've looked at recently or looking to do in the near future?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, sorry. So, without giving any sort of commercial confidence away, is funding something you've looked at recently or looking to do so in the immediate future?
Yes, we are looking to do so because we got some opportunities, and we're just looking and exploring all avenues, I suppose, is the phrase. And because of the way things are developing at the moment, with energy prices going up, etc., we need to take it up to another level. So yes, it is.
Great, thanks, David. Welcome along.
Thank you.
Leanne.
Hi,
Leanne.
morning. I'm just making inquiries with regards to funding, really, as I'm going into sort of the childcare sort of remit. So this is my first meeting with you guys today. So I'm just trying to find out what's available and, just having some connections, really. So thank you.
Is it an established business or a pre-start at the moment?
It's a pre-start.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Welcome along. Dawn.
Hiya, am I on speaker? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we're Cook Smart Cymru and we're based in Swansea, and we are a cookery school we're trying to develop around the Swansea area and further afield to get people out cooking, eating healthy meals, and basically, going forward and trying to develop skills that they might have not had, get people out from maybe if they've been in lockdown and have lost their way, and just get them out cooking and socialising with others as well. So, but it's about cooking smart and eating smart, basically.
Good, very topical at the moment, no doubt, I'm sure. Good. Welcome along, Dawn. Mary.
Hello, good morning. I start with my usual apology for appearing to be here as a councillor. I am not here as a councillor, it's just that Teams doesn't let me log out of my councillor account. I am here as director of Fairer Future, which is a social enterprise offering training and consultancy specialising in poverty in the UK. So I've been trading since last autumn, and I had a lot of business startup costs, which I would like to recover if possible. So Zoom subscription, professional indemnity and public liability insurance, data protection registration, all these kind of startup costs, which I have paid out of earnings for the company, but I understand that there are grants available that would allow me to recover those costs, and I've also got graphic design fees. I've been invited to exhibit at a conference, so I need to buy a pull-up banner and get some leaflets printed, and I don't have the funds for that. So so I'm interested in funding. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. I mean, certainly startup funding is something that we can look at. Happy to sort of take the conversation offline, Mary, rather than sort of discuss it in this public forum if you think that would be helpful. But hopefully sort of some of the wider points that we'll cover today will be useful for you in terms of just principles of how you go about funding it, and we'll come on to that as well.
Great, thank you.
Toby, sorry to throw you in. I realised you've just joined the meeting, sort of throw you in at the deep end. Toby, we're just doing quick introductions in terms of people that are here. So explain a little bit about yourself, your business, and what brings you here today. You're on mute at the moment, Toby. No, okay, not to worry. Right, I think we've gone through everyone. We'll hand over to Emily now, who'll cover a short presentation of about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll come on to do a quick one from sort of the overarching Swansea Council perspective, and then we'll come on to do questions at the end. So, Emily, across to you to introduce yourself and then obviously give your presentation. Thanks very much.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Emily from Callaghan Bank of Wales. I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got that. Thank you.
So yeah, just a summary really of what we provide, funding for startups, what you need to look for really when applying. So what we do at Development Bank of Wales, we deliver on behalf of the Welsh Government. So we act independently, but we are owned by the Welsh Government. So we provide loans from £1,000 up to 5 million. So because I'm in the micro loan scheme, I only provide the loans from 1,000 up to 50,000. We provide equity investment as well from 50k up to 5 million. Seed finance for pre-revenue or tech startups. Equity investments for technology and based business. We've also got Angels Invest Wales as well. Development loans. I'm going to be focusing more on the debt side of things. So what we can offer our customers, fixed interest rates, repayment terms of up to 10 years. So we cannot offer a level of flexibility there. So if you wanted to take a loan over a longer period, then we can look into that. Dedicated local account managers. So, throughout the life of the loan, you have an account manager who will obviously manage your account. So then if you do want to reapply for follow-on funding, then you can do that as well further down the line. We also have a strong network of co-investors and advisors. So we do work alongside other funders and lenders, such as Pembrokeshire Lottery. We work alongside Business Wales, with the startup loan company, banks we can work alongside. So follow-on funding I've mentioned. So there's obviously that relationship management and support, which is ongoing. So 99% of new customers recommend us. With the term that I mentioned, which is also flexible, the loans can be repaid at any time for no penalty charges. So it is quite good for startup business if obviously you haven't got that track record, so you can't get a bank loan from the bank. But then obviously you can apply to us if you're not eligible with your bank, and then further down the line, then you can repay our loan for no penalty charges. So with regards to the process, managing the risks, so number one is the application process. So you can apply online, or there's a PDF version you can download. Alternatively, you might be referred to me, or you might know me from one of these events as an example, so you can just drop me an email. Number two is assess. So I myself will assess the microloans on my pack. So I'll assess affordability, the viability of the business plan, and whether it meets our eligibility criteria. Number three is whether it's approved or declined. And then obviously it will proceed to the drawdown if it is approved. So that's when you get your money. And number four is not forgetting the ongoing support and the relationship management. Then alternatively as well, if the business has further expansion plans, follow-on funding may be available. How can we help? So in terms of funding, it can be used for a number of things. The only thing it can't be used for is refinancing. So it can be used for things such as, you might be taking on a new premises, new markets, products and services. Might be that you're buying a business, or you're buying shares from an existing company. Stock and marketing, and equipment. Or you might be taking on some new staff, or obviously it could be used for any startup costs. So with regards to interest rates, they vary from 4 to 12% with regards to our debt loans. So this averages out at 7.2% currently. So with the startup loans, we have an eligibility criteria. So to be eligible for a startup loan, you need to have made some form of cash contribution. So this isn't set in stone, it just needs to be meaningful. So ideally, it would be a match contribution, but we can also look at things on a case-by-case basis. So knowledge and sector experience. So obviously, as a business owner, you need to know the business. So ideally, you've got experience within the sector, or you might have owned a business before within the same industry. Viable business plan. I'll go into more detail on this further down the line. And so ideally for startup, you've got some contracts in place, or an order book, or evidence of sales. So generally with our micro loans, sometimes it can be classed as too early stage. So in that instance, we would like to see evidence that the debt could be, we need to get comfortable that the debt can be serviced. So if there is a contract in place, then that is great. As well as that, obviously a credit check will be conducted. So with regards to the application documents required, so for a standard application, we'll need the application form, a full business plan, so either to include a CV or a summary in there on your previous experience, so relevant experiences, 3 months personal bank statements or business if the business is already trading, a statement of assets and liabilities form which has a budget planner on it as well, latest management accounts if available. So if the company has traded for a few months and you have access to accounting software, then that's great. If not, then obviously you can let me know. And then depending on how much funding you want, you'll either need a 1-year cash flow forecast or a 2-year cash flow forecast. So common mistakes. So common mistakes I often see, people apply for funding too soon. So they'll fill in the application form and think that they will get accepted just from filling in the application form. It's you know, obviously a longer process than that, but to apply for funding, your business needs to really be ready or have ideally traded a bit prior to applying. So another common mistake is not gaining enough support and advice from the likes of Business Wales or other business owners. So where possible, I would suggest obviously taking up the free advice and support from Business Wales. They have years of experience, you know, often they've owned businesses themselves, so they can obviously act as a bit of a mentor for you. So another common mistake is minimal market research. So, you know, obviously knowing the market at the moment is extremely important with the likes of the pandemic, you know, which has obviously really ruined some industries throughout the period. So obviously, you know, knowing the market is really important. Identifying competitors. So that's one of the things that I need to cover off on my report is additional competitors within the market and what you can offer in comparison to them. Knowing the unique selling point of the company is also relevant to competitors. So what makes you different from the competitors? So what will give you a competitive advantage? So also another common mistake is customers often, when filling the financial forecast, they will often just guess numbers for the purposes of an application in the hope that it will get approved. So obviously when starting a business, as I say, I would recommend working with an advisor on the figures. So knowing the market, so obviously comparing and contrasting prices of different competitors, you know, knowing the profitability of the business. So, you know, if you can work out exactly what the cost will be of the business, what you hope to take in earnings, then obviously this will need to be identified prior to filling in a forecast. So it's a bit of a lead. So top tips for applying. Know your business and industry inside out. So in this instance, that will make things a lot easier for myself. So there's a series of questions that I might ask if they haven't been covered off in the business plan. So if you know your business well, then obviously this will make things a lot easier when applying for a loan. So ensure the business plan covers off key things such as the unique selling point, market trends, competitors and licenses and permits. So are there any particular licenses you need, insurances for your type of business? These will all need to be covered off. Market research. So is the sector high risk or is it stable at the moment? Will it be impacted by the pandemic if we have another lockdown? If so, will you be able to diversify the business? Have you thought of strategies, you know, that will safeguard your company? So working with a Business Wales advisor, as I've mentioned, is also one of my other top tips. So take the free advice where you can. And when forecasting, set realistic and achievable goals for business. So, you know, I often say that businesses apply for a loan, they send in a forecast and they forecasted 2 million in the first year. You know, that's not going to be achievable. So obviously it depends on what type of business it is, but I would suggest forecasting achievable goals for the business, you know, that you can hopefully achieve and maybe even get better results. So try to establish a following or test the market before applying for a loan where possible. If you've already got a bit of a solid following across social media platforms, and obviously that is obviously a positive when we are looking at businesses. So we're here to help the business succeed. So we'll be asking some, if you have any questions at the end. But my details, if you want to get in touch. That's all, really.
Great, thank you for that, Emily. So we'll come back and do questions. I've got a few slides just to run through Before we go any further, I've got a grovelling apology to make to my colleague Steve Williams, who I forgot to introduce himself as we were going around the room. So Steve, do you want to just quickly say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. No problem, Matt. I've done the same to you, so it's probably payback. My name's Steve Williams. I work in economic development department within Swansea Council, supporting not only established businesses but startups as well.
Great, thanks for that. And we've been joined by Diana since during the last presentation. Diana, if you're off mute, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to the room who's here?
I'm muted.
That's it. I can hear you now. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, I'm Diana, and I'm just starting my business. I haven't gone far yet. I'm just in the mid process of doing my business plan. Of a wholesale shop for sundries. Yeah, and I'm just obviously getting all the information I need before I go ahead with it. So, and that's all is it, really.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let me just share my screen quickly and then I'll run through my slides. Can we all see that okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic, okay. Okay, so this is just a quick run through. I'm not going to be going into any depth in terms of specific funding schemes. It's more of an overview in terms of potential locations that you can, where you can identify funding from, and also just sort of picking up from the bit previously around sort of top tips and things to consider in terms of access to finance at the moment. So I think the first thing to say is that the world of business funding, grant funding in particular, is changing really, really quickly. I've been a local government officer for 20 plus years. I think it's changing at a faster rate now than any point during my whole career in local government. On the whole, that's a good thing because it means there's a greater availability of funding available. Certainly, I think, you know, even COVID support aside, there's probably more funding available at this point and in this part of the world than any point that I've known previously. So on the whole, I think the funding picture is fairly good. So don't just, when you're looking for potential sources of grant funding, don't just check it once every 6 months because it is changing literally in some cases on a weekly basis at the moment. Some of the points that I'm going to point you towards, I will be checking those maybe even on a weekly basis at the moment, just to check what's available, because schemes are becoming on stream and off stream at that sort of rate at the moment. So whatever you look at, do make sure you check it regularly. And a couple of sub points on that really, as well as checking the schemes regularly themselves, just check the eligibility criteria for individual schemes on a regular basis, because on the whole they're rigid, but in some cases they are subject to change. The criteria might be loosened in some examples, you know, where that funding isn't going out the door as quickly as they would like. So just make sure that if you identify something, you're checking the eligibility as well on a fairly regular basis. And also check deadlines. And again, for similar reasons, if they are ahead of target or behind target on particular funding streams, it's possible that those deadlines could be brought forward or backwards, depending on what it is that you're looking for. So in many cases they're fixed, but in many cases they're not as well. So just be aware of those deadlines, and I'll come on to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So in terms of identifying particular funding streams, one of the top tips I can give you really, and it's sort of one of our own really, is to subscribe to and read the Business Swansea and or Swansea Tourism e-newsletter. The majority of new schemes, key schemes for businesses in the Swansea area, land on our desk and we get sight of them. So certainly if anything new is coming out, we'll put it in that e-news. Typically it gets sent roughly every fortnight thereabouts. So the read rate on that e-news is not as good as it should be. And one of my concerns is that there's businesses that are missing out on these funding schemes because they're not aware of it and they're not opening that e-news. So A, subscribe to it, please do that. But B, if you are subscribed to it, please do read it, because there's lots of information that we're putting out via that. both from Swansea Council and via our partners as well. That does cover a fairly broad base as well. We do have a funding page on the Swansea business support pages. So swansea.gov.uk/business funding. That is the landing page for all the key funding schemes, particularly the ones that Swansea Council itself are administering and looking after. So again, do keep checking into that page on a semi-regular basis, because the nature of what we're doing is changing at a fairly rapid rate. Really important resource, this one, and I'll show you what it looks like in a moment. Business Wales have a finance locator within their website. Haven't really got time to run through a demo at the moment, but this is a screen grab that I took on Monday, I think it was. Web address is at the top of the page there. It's a bit clunky, but if you go to Business Wales Finance Locator in your search engine, it'll come up with this page. So as you can see, when I checked this on Monday, there's over 1,000 live funds available on the Business Wales database at the moment. I checked back this morning and it's actually gone up slightly from that already. So again, you can sort of see the search functionality that's built into the system itself. You can drill down fairly specifically in terms of who you are and what sort of funding you're looking for, and it will narrow that 1,000 plus grants and funding streams down to something far more manageable, because obviously you haven't got time or energy or will to trawl through all 1,000 schemes. So this is a powerful tool, and sort of if there's one piece of advice that I would give you today in terms of trying to identify funding streams, this is probably the one that I would signpost you towards in terms of trying to drill down. And again, it's one of those resources that probably not enough businesses are aware of and are passing up opportunities because they just don't know that it's there. So have a look at that in your own time, and certainly I think it's a valuable resource. Central government, so gov.uk, the UK government, have also got one. I'm less keen on this one, partly because there's only 155 schemes listed on there at the moment. And looking down the list, it's not quite as relevant as I would like to businesses located within the South Wales area. My hunch from looking at it is that these tend to be the sort of the really big 6-figure plus schemes that they're aiming at, which if you're after that sort of thing is great. But if you sort of were to focus on one thing, I would signpost you towards the Business Wales resource rather than this one. But if you've got the time, do have a look at this, albeit I think maybe it's a little bit less useful than the Business Wales one is. And also, I'm not sure, I don't think we've got any people from the third sector in today, but not-for-profits, third sector, community interest companies, there is a specific resource available to them at funding.cymru. And again, it's a similar functionality in terms of you being able to, rather than looking at across the whole of the funds available for the third sector, again, you can use this tool at that web address at the top there to drill down and identify funds for your third sector enterprise, if that's the space that you're in, because it is different to the for-profit in terms of what's available. So having this separate and specific resource is quite useful as well. A very quick rundown of other sources. I'm sure you'll be aware of these, and sort of a lot of this is not news to you, but I'll run down the list anyway, just to make sure that you're considering all options. First of all is personal investment. This is something we tend to see probably more for startup support than anything else, and very often people that through unfortunate circumstances have received a bulk payment of money, perhaps through redundancy, and then use that to finance their new business startup. So it's something we see within that sphere quite regularly, maybe not quite so appropriate for business growth, but certainly in terms of business startups, we do see that. So it's something that, if that opportunity is presented to you, you might want to consider. Credit cards, obviously this one comes with a sort of a fairly strong note of caution, is that it can be a very expensive way for you to borrow money. And therefore, if that's the route you want to take over the longer term, you might want to sort of think about your strategy, but perhaps over a very short period of a few days, then they can provide a bridge to allow you to make purchases. But it comes with a heavy note of caution on that one, I think. Friends and family, again, something that we see quite regularly with our startup grants is that where people require funding for their business and it goes above and beyond the scope of our startup fund, The remainder of that money will be put up by friends and family. You'll know your network in that regard better than anybody else, and know to what level you're comfortable or feel that's appropriate. But certainly, again, it's something that we see quite regularly in terms of people accessing that sort of money. Private investment, I'm not necessarily suggesting you go on Dragon's Den, although that is an option to you. But there are various sources of private investment beyond friends and family that you might want to consider, perhaps for an equity share within the business. And again, sort of not going to cover that in too much detail, but it is an option certainly. I think crowdfunding is probably something that we can do a standalone session on, and it's something that I intend to do in the next 1 or 2 power hours that we do. So I won't cover it in too much detail because I think it does merit its own session. Only to say that there are elements to consider with this. There are dedicated crowdfunding websites. In terms of your strategy for that, you probably just need to think around your creativity. So typically, a crowdfunding approach will offer products for pledges is sort of the term that I've seen. So you'll offer, for £100, you'll give away whatever it is regarding your new product line or whatever it might be. So usually by pledging support from your would-be crowdfunders, you give away either a sample of that product or an experience or whatever it might be. Typically, if you go on one of the crowdfunding platforms, they will take a small commission. 5% is sort of the typical sort of level of equity that I've seen as being the crowdfunding platform's cut of what it is that you're doing. And I think probably if you're looking to do crowdfunding, the key to it is being creative. So creative around your offer, certainly creative around the social media or PR comms campaign that you would need to back that up to make sure that people are aware of it, because it's no good just sticking on a crowdfunder site and hoping people will find it and come to you. You need to back that up with a fairly substantial communication and perhaps social media campaign as well. But again, I think we'll come back and cover that in a bit more detail because I think it does warrant its own session. And I'm trying to identify somebody locally who's been through that process that can perhaps provide us some insight with regard to that. High street banks. I did a little bit of research on this again, I think it was Monday. Huge variation in terms of the offers that are available to you as customers, in terms of not just the interest rate, but the amount that you're able to borrow. So if you're looking to go to I put high street in brackets because there are challenger banks like Monzo and Starling out there now, but certainly if you're looking to go down the route of banks, do shop around for deals, because the bit of desktop research that I did at the start of the week did show that there's huge variation in that. So it's a route to you, but make sure you're getting the deal that's right for you. And then finally, I think we've covered this point in detail, but Development Bank of Wales certainly are there and are, I would say, more than competitive with the offer that high street banks are able to offer at the time. And then finally, just from me, some hints and tips in terms of applying. So we're currently administering some startup grant, startup funding, and we have been for the last few months. And there's just a sort of few pointers that we've identified from the applications that we receive. And I know a lot of this sounds bleeding obvious, but believe me, there's a huge amount of occasions that, despite we want the bleeding obvious to be adhered to, we don't always get what we need. So it sounds a bit like what you were told when you were doing your exams at school, but read the question, read the guidance really carefully, and make sure that you're eligible for submitting any funding stream before you put time, energy, effort into applying for it, because there's no point in you putting time, effort, energy into a funding request, a grant request, only to find at the end of it you're not eligible. So please do read, double check, read again the eligibility to make sure that whatever it is that you're applying for is something that, before we get on to whether, the details of to what extent your application is looked upon favourably, that you at least get through the door in terms of being eligible, because otherwise it's time and effort wasted. Please do tackle issues before they become an issue. And what I mean by that is, so for example, one of the criteria that we have is effectively you can't owe the council any money through council tax arrears or business rates arrears. And we stick that very clearly in our terms and conditions. But on more than one occasion, that's come back to be an issue. So if you think it's going to be an issue, don't ignore it and hope that your would-be funder won't be aware of it or won't check for it or won't, become aware of it. Please do, address that issue if you think it's going to be something that's flagged up, because again, it's only going to cause delay or possibly even failure to your grant application, which is again time and effort you don't really want to be spending on having to address. And then the last point on this section, don't be afraid to ask, I say put silly questions, but questions. There is no such thing as a silly question. From somebody who assesses these grants, I would far more sort of prefer that these questions are asked before you get to the process of submission, and we have to go back to you with points of clarification or things that are not quite clear from the application. So if you're unsure of anything, please do ask the assessors, the grant awarding body, whoever it might be, those questions before you submit. And there genuinely is no such thing as a stupid question, despite how much you think it might be a stupid question. There really isn't. Again, this seems really obvious. Please ensure that you submit everything requested with your grant application. So if it's asking you for a business plan and a cash flow forecast, make sure you submit a business plan and a cash flow forecast. If it asks you for 2 evidence quotes, supply 2 evidenced quotes. So again, it's just a case of reading the detail and making sure that you're submitting everything that you've been asked for. Again, it sounds obvious, but I would say of the requests that we receive for startup applications, probably more than half of them have not provided everything that they need to provide in terms of that application. And again, it just causes time delays, it causes more work for all parties involved, and particularly at the moment where we're getting towards year end, our timescales are really tight, and any delay that is caused by us not receiving what we need to could really jeopardise any funding application that we get. And whilst we're sort of quite prepared to go back and ask for questions, in some cases, if you've not provided what's requested, that might even sort of not get you to the first stage. So just be aware of what you need to provide and make sure that you send it. If you're making a request, be clear on why it is you need the finance. So if you need a new widget machine for your business, explain why you need a new widget machine, on what that's going to do for your company growth. How is it going to, provide you with access to new markets? How is it going to lead to job growth? Don't assume that when the assessor is reading it, they know why you want that investment in your business. And make sure that request for finance or the product or service that you're looking to buy, make sure that's linked in with your business plan and it all links together, so we can clearly see when we're looking at it what it is that you're asking for, why it is you're asking for it, and in your business plan and cash flow forecast, that all just flows through so we can see, that it all joins up and is a sort of a nice rounded approach. Again, it sounds obvious, but it's not always adhered to. Be aware of the deadline and do not miss it. In the vast majority of cases, if you miss that deadline, your application will not be looked at. There's one extreme example which I always tend to refer to, and it is an extreme example. There was an organisation that spent a number of weeks, and I mean weeks, working up a European funding bid, and they called in significant resources to their team to work up the European funding application. Came to submission date, and they did not account for the fact that Brussels worked on a different timescale to the UK, and they missed the deadline by 45 minutes. That application was not accepted, and there was weeks of work down the drain. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're going to do anything like that, but please be aware of that deadline and don't miss it, because in the vast majority of cases, it will result in your application just being thrown out straight away. And the last one is don't submit and forget. And what I mean by that is that even if you've submitted everything that's requested on the application form, you've provided all the supporting documents, it's very possible that the funders just might want to come back to you with points of clarification. So just be aware that once you've submitted and it's all gone, just sort of keep checking your inbox regularly for any correspondence from the funders, and where that correspondence does come back, please do to respond to it as quickly as you can, because again, any delays to that whole process potentially might cause you some problems in terms of getting through that process within the timescales. And then the last thing really is I've mentioned our startup grant fund, which I think might be of interest to a couple of people. We've got some pretty tight deadlines with regard to that, in so much as we require applications for that tomorrow, because we need to spend that budget by the end of this financial year. It's possible, although not a given, that we'll have a fresh round of startup funding in April. And again, if we do, all the more reason to keep checking our promotion and PR on a regular basis, just to make sure. And then secondly, and again, I can't give too much detail on this, but from April, we will have some funding in place for digital development, so work around improving our digital visibility. So your website is the obvious one for that, and also green growth. And again, I can't give too much details on that, but if you've got areas where you think either of those projects might be something you'd be looking to apply for, just be aware that in about, 5 or 6 weeks or so, we're going to have something coming out with regard to those particular areas of business growth. So that covers off my section for the time being. I can't see any questions in the chat. Has anyone got any questions that they particularly have got to ask either myself or Emily in terms of what you've heard today? If you could just stick your hand up using the little wavy icon at the top, then we can bring you in. Yeah, Diana, go ahead.
That's all I want to know is, will we get all this in like an email so I can print it out?
In terms of the slides, you mean?
Yeah, in terms of the course, that you do today.
Yeah, certainly. So there's two things. First of all, I'm happy to make the slides available to anyone who wants them afterwards. And secondly, we're recording this session, so you'll be able to go back and watch it again on our YouTube channel, hopefully later this afternoon, but certainly over the next few days. That will be up on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and pick up anything that you've missed.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Dawn.
Yeah, I was just inquiring about oh, my mind's gone blank now, sorry. The funding and grants, because I know there was a grant for the winter grant, wellness grant. Is that part of you guys? No.
Not sure, no.
But it was helping local businesses, because I'm finding it quite difficult at the moment to draw in business, because there's lots of funding that's been available throughout Swansea for businesses that sort of gives people free places. And then obviously I'm offering a service, but it's a payable for service. And I feel that sort of I've lost an opportunity for other people to come and use my service, but they're all obviously going for the free services. Does that make sense? I'm
not entirely with you, sorry, no.
No. Well, I was just wondering if there was a grant so that I can so encourage people to come and use my service, but it's free. Okay. So it's like sort of, it's a grant towards helping pay for that slot for that
subsidising the places effectively. Is that right?
There you are. Yeah, sorry, I'm not very good with the terminology and everything.
No,
trying to use stuff. Sorry.
Can I help? I'm sorry to jump in, but I know about the winter wellness grant. So Diana, you need to contact the Tackling Poverty Service in the council, who have a food. They have a grant about food poverty, which might be particularly helpful for you, and they would also know who. I think it's Mark Gosney's team, but I think they would know who you could get in touch with about the winter wellness if that is still available. I think your point is that you're offering cookery lessons, and that some people might be able to access those for free if you get some funding. So I would go to the Tackling Poverty Service with that query. Yeah.
So sorry, I couldn't quite hear you properly. Who are they?
The Tackling Poverty Service in the council. Okay. I'll find an email address for you now and put it in the chat, okay?
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that. That's great. Mary, you got your hand up.
I'm just always baffled by cash flow forecasts. So my business Wales advisor kind of sat down with me when I first set up the company a couple of years ago and just wrote out a load of numbers that really seem to be quite imaginary. And I don't, when So I've got an online training workshop. I advertise it. 1 month I had 6 people. The next month I had 4 people. I never know how many people are going to be coming along, and I can have targets and try and get up to a certain number, but really it's very difficult to predict. And I never know if a tender is going to be successful, or if a discussion about a commission is going to go my way. So I find it really, really hard to come up with a reliable cash flow forecast for a business like mine. I wondered if you had any advice about that.
Yep, certainly. I mean, I'll give you my view, and then maybe Emily, you can sort of chime in from your side of things. I mean, I think what I'd say about it is it's a forecast, and we're not asking you to predict the future, and we're not going to sort of hold you to it and come back in 6 months and saying this figure says 60 when it should have been 50. You know, it's from our perspective in terms of administering the startup grant, it's to make sure that you've given some real thought around to where your business is likely to be in the weeks and months ahead. And I say we're not going to hold you to it, but it's to demonstrate that you've done some forward planning in the business. And of course, it's subject to change. But I think I would say don't stress about it too much, because it is what it is, and it's a forecast. Emily, have you got any further thoughts on that?
I would just say try and break it down, keep it simple. So try and think of it as in, so date, as if you split it into days and then weeks and then months, so that the forecast is easier. So what's the price of the product or service that you're offering? How many of those products or services do you expect to sell in 1 day? Then times that by the week, and try and set it out so it's easier for us to see as an outsider as well, because if people just plonk down figures, it's, we don't have any idea where those figures have come from. So if you can try and just break it up a bit, then it'll make life easier for us when applying for finance. Just try and break it up by the days, and then obviously times by the week, and then the monthly figures then should be easier. And then obviously with the costings, you should be able to find out quotes for things like insurance. You should know roughly what your overheads will cost if you've contracted suppliers, etc. So yeah, that's my advice really.
Yes, the other thing is just to make sure that your cash flow forecast, we can see the link between your cash flow and your business plan as well. I've seen examples where there's discrepancy between the two, and that's not a great look from someone who's assessing. But also just make sure that if you're projecting growth in your business plan, it's reflected in your cash flow and vice versa, just so we can, from an assessment point of view, draw the links between the two as well. David, I saw your hand go up and down again. Is there still a question?
Yeah, no. Oh, hold on. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Right, 2 questions, if I may. Loan and grant, are you able to apply for both, or has it got to be one or t'other?
Well, typically they will be separate funding streams. So
yes,
in terms of our startup grant, certainly there's no reason that anyone who's had a loan through Development Bank of Wales or anybody else, on the whole, well, not on the whole, in any case, that wouldn't be prohibitive. The only thing to think about sometimes, and this is sort of on a case by case basis, but if there's an element of match funding attached to any grant application, there may be stipulations around where that money can come from, in terms of where that 50% or whatever percentage it might be match funding might come from. Some funds might require that to be from the company's own resources. Others will have a bit more flexibility and will allow you to, require it from loans or whatever source it might be. So it's not something I personally can give a blanket answer to.
No, that's fine. Okay.
But certainly in many cases, I don't think that one prevents you from accessing the other at all.
Okay, thank you. And just, I know you said about the 2 things that are coming out April, digital and green growth. When will that information be available? Because with green growth, it might sort of link into what we do and how.
Okay, I can't give you an exact date, but the reason we're launching in April is that we are committed to getting the current financial year's funding out the door by the end of March, and hopefully that will give us a bit of space to be able to launch. So I would say the first half of April, certainly you can expect to see some details on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Emily, anything further to add on that, or?
No, it doesn't really affect if you've got you've got a grant, that's fine, unless if it's established business and obviously it's making a profit, but if we deduct off the grant that they've had, then it's loss making, and that can sort of bring up some questions for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it wouldn't affect it if you've applied for both.
Okay, thank you.
Dinah and Dawn, are they legacy hands or are they new questions?
I'm going to go for legacy.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
here, sorry.
Okay, across to you then, Steve.
I'll take that off, is it? Oh yeah, I didn't even know you could do that. They were.
There we are.
Yeah, I just want to ask Emily about applicants' credit ratings, and how do you basically assess that? Is it a case by case basis, or have you got like sort of minimum requirements with actual credit scores?
So the credit score the interest rate, if it's an established company, will be, you know, the business normally gets a score, and obviously the consumer will have a score as well. So we'll look at your personal credit and the business credit as well to sort of establish what the interest rate will be. So that will be one of the factors that we'll consider. For a startup, it will be a fixed rate of 9%. So I've forgotten what the other question was.
No, I think you've pretty much answered it with regards to what.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say the only thing in terms of the score, the personal interest rate, it wouldn't matter, you know, if it's low, but if there's a CCJ on there, then obviously that would need to be satisfied before we can proceed.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
Okay.
Emily, what are your timescales in terms of sort of from, you know, if people supply what they're required to sort of getting this turnaround and money out the door, what sort of timescales people be looking at?
So for a full application, that's not a fast track. So a new business or a growing business wanting over 25k, it's a 7 working day SLA period. So once we've got everything in, you can have an answer within 7 working days. And then obviously it's a case of sending out the paperwork and drawing down the loan. So yeah, you're looking, you know, from 2 to 3 weeks max.
That's pretty good, yeah, certainly. And sort of it's something that you've mentioned. I mean, I would make sure that if you haven't done so already, just hammering home that point about accessing Business Wales advisors to help you get those documents in place beforehand. Certainly, sort of again going back and referring from the startup grants that we receive, in many cases where that business plan could have done with a bit of help, you know, Business Wales could and would have been influential in making sure that that business plan was of sufficient quality before submitting. So please do access sort of the Business Wales either one-to-one support or actually in terms of the cash flow and business planning. There are resources available on their website in terms of guides and templates as well. So do have a look at those. About 5.2, are there any sort of more burning questions or any more questions full stop people want to ask before we sort of start to wrap things up? I'll take that as a no. Okay, so the next session of the Business Power Hour will be 4 weeks today on the 24th of March. Topic to be identified, possibly on crowdfunding, but I will ping round details of that to you as soon as I've got them. So we'll be able to go from there. Anything further from you, Steve, in terms of?
No, I don't think so. We've got a Startup Enterprise Club for young people happening on the 10th of March. But as Matt said, sign up to the newsletter because we have got the Rebel Business School coming to do a sort of week-long session for startups towards the end of April. So we'll circulate all the posters and everything via our communication channels and newsletter once everything's confirmed.
Great. And then the final thing from me in terms of village notices is Thursday the 3rd of March. We are joint hosting with Sell to Wales a workshop in terms of procuring with the council. So if you're interested in that, I can stick details of that in an email round to you later on, along with the presentations. So just to be aware of it, I realise a number of you are interested in getting into that line of work. So there's a 3 or 4 hour session on that date, which will hopefully be very useful in terms of not only helping you to identify opportunities, but also hints and tips to be more successful as and when that's identified. Yeah, Mary, I'll stick an email around to everyone on this call and make sure that you've got details of that. No problem at all. Great. If there's nothing further, then I will call it a day at 3 minutes to. We've done it in 57 minutes. How about that? Thanks all for coming along, and see you in 4 weeks' time at the next one. Thanks very much.